I think anybody who doesn't use AI at the moment is going to be left behind. I think AI is going to be more and more part of our day-to-day job. We're going to have agents who are going to automate a lot of it for us. I think as far as my job is concerned, augmented reality is going to be very much to the fore.
As freelancers, we're constantly walking the line between working for ourselves and running a business. Where does freelancing end and business ownership begin, and does it even matter? Our guest today, Penny Hopkinson, has lived both sides, starting as a freelance journalist before building a global business. Her career has taken her from reporting in the Middle East to helping businesses achieve operational excellence. As the founder of Manual Writers International, she's transformed how franchises and business owners document and share knowledge. A companion of the British Franchise Association, she's an expert in turning expertise into actionable systems. And in 2023, she published Manual Magic, redefining how franchises empower their networks. Today, she's here to share what's changed in freelancing over the years, and specifically to catch up to us about that blurred line between freelancing and business ownership, and practical advice, hopefully, for those of us who are still trying to figure out what exactly we are. So welcome, Penny. It's great to have you here.
Absolutely delighted to be here.
So why don't you kick us off? Because when we were speaking offline, you were telling me all about your freelancing days in reporting, and you were based in the Middle East, and your career has taken quite an interesting trajectory. So let's start off chatting about your true freelancing, and how that was structured and how that's kind of fed into what you're doing now.
Well, I think many people get into freelancing because there's some kind of critical point during their career, and they decide that perhaps it would be better not to be employed, but they kind of get a nudge. So I was very merrily working as international editor and launch editor of a magazine called Media International, the Journal for Planners of International Advertising. And I was headhunted by a PR company, and that was a huge mistake. Because they headhunted me for my knowledge of publications all over the world, and particularly Europe. And when I told them that there wasn't a national publication anywhere else other than, or national newspaper anywhere else other than the UK, they began to stamp their feet and say, "Oh, well, why have we got you here?" Because no other country in Europe has a true national newspaper. Anyway, it was short-lived. I didn't have my contract renewed, and I thought, well, why don't I use all my contacts from the days when I was on Media International and try and freelance? And it started to work because one of my contacts was the new publisher of Gulf Air's In-Flight magazine, and he wanted me to be editor of it. It was really a little travel guide because nobody in those days was going out to the Middle East and understanding how to do business there and what there was, because there was very, very little. I think there are probably only a handful of five-star hotels, if that, in any of the Gulf states. So that kicked me off, and I gradually built a freelance business off the back of my contacts. So the first one was Near East Business, which was part of a big American publishing company. And that was really a fantastic break because I'd gone to Oman and I came back with a raft of stories and sold them all. So that really sort of established me at the beginning of my Middle East socio-economic correspondent days.
In terms of pitching those stories, how did you go about that? Was it all sort of cold pitches, or was it publications that you'd written for before? How did you go about actually selling those stories?
I would phone the editor up and say, I'm going off to Oman, place that very few people have been to. I'd like to do something. Would you be interested? And they said, oh, yes, this would be fantastic. So I sold articles mostly before I left to Export Times, and that started a long, long association with Export Times, doing supplements for them, both at home and abroad. And then there was a business magazine, which was in Arabic, part of the big Johnson International, who also published Near East Business, and they wanted articles. And then Middle East Travel had just started, so I became a regular correspondent for them as well. And then the International Herald Tribune and the Wall Street Journal. Every national day, and they have national days, they're all different around the Gulf states. They would do a large supplement backed by advertising, and I would contribute. So there was never any shortage of work for me, which was wonderful.
How you say you phoned up the editor? Did they say, okay, we want a 1,500 word piece on XYZ, or did you actually pitch the story? And then what was your kind of pricing structure? Did you say, this is what I'm doing and this is what I expect to get paid for it? Like, how was that discussion from a freelancing perspective? Because freelancers and rates, we're a little bit like oil and water. We're never quite sure how to broach the subject.
Well, I would phone up and say that I'm going to the Middle East, I'm going to the Gulf states in particular, and this is what I'm expecting to do. And would you be interested in an article? And if they said yes, it wasn't really so much a discussion on how much they were going to pay, because they had a very fixed idea. And I think in those days you were lucky to get the equivalent of £100 per 1,000 words. It was miserable, really miserable. So you had to write a lot to make any reasonable income. Costs were less than they are now, but we're going back to 1976, 77. So freelance writing then was not a really viable business.
How has that changed over time? We're going to get to in a moment well, maybe let's dive into that now, what you're busy with now. Because when we chatted at a recent networking event, we were kind of talking about that weird gray area between freelancing and working for yourself. We're not really true freelancers anymore, but we're not quite business owners. We're somewhere kind of in between, because we're freelancing, but we have to run things like a business. So do you want to dive into what you're doing now and how things have changed? Do you see yourself as a freelancer still? Are you a business owner? How has that changed your approach and your pricing, etc.?
Ah, yes. Now that's very interesting, because yes, I do run a business now. And the pivot was after the Middle East became more political rather than socio-economic. I found that the advertising was dwindling tremendously, and therefore I was more or less out of a job. And an old editor friend of mine said, we want a quality correspondent. Are you up for that? And I said, yes, that would be terrific. Now, I got so interested in all the elements of quality management, from total quality management, quality circles, Kaizen, the Japanese equivalent. And I thought, well, I could make a business out of this. I got a job with the Corporation of Lloyd's, which is the big insurance corporation. And that meant that I could formalize what I did in a niche. So I then began I didn't have a limited company. I'm still a sole trader, but I've trademarked Manual Writers International. That was launched in 86. So I did my proof of concept for 2 years, which worked very well. And then I got my first franchise. So I help franchisors reimagine their dull text heavy operations manuals as true knowledge sharing environments where everybody can learn and grow and participate. So it's quite a leap of faith. But the difference is that I work to a system I have a business name, although I'm Penny Hopkinson, trading as Manual Writers International. For everything that I do, I was associated with Manual Writers International. But the funny thing is, I wrote Manual Magic in 2023, and I am now known as Penny Hopkinson of Manual Magic. It's a bit of serendipity because nobody now associates me with Manual Writers International. Yet I had the business for over 30 years.
That's crazy. I've got a company name. I'm a registered business, but I know Shay is a sole prop and trades under her own name. So it's, again, we've had many discussions over which is the better structure or framework for running a freelancing business. And there's really it's swings and roundabouts. There's pros and cons to both.
So I'd like to get Penny's way in. Do you think, okay, obviously bringing out the book made your actual name come to the fore, but do you think an element of that is also in today's day and age, people seek that personal brand versus a corporate brand? People are looking for human to human, not human to company. Do you think that plays into it in your experience?
I think it does. I think today we're all about personal branding and elevating that personal brand. I mean, in the days when I was a freelancer, it was getting known for being a specialist in a particular niche. So mine was obviously the Middle East, and that was wonderful. But you didn't have social media. Communication was completely different. You were focused on providing feature stories for newspapers and magazines and doing a little bit of I did a little bit of critiquing on if there was a new hotel or a new flight service, something like that. I would do a review, but there wasn't anything like blogs or there was no social media. So you couldn't really elevate your personal brand beyond the fact that you were writing and got a byline for whatever article was published.
So how
And
has
of course,
social media changed your business?
oh, massively, massively. Um, I, I can admit to having been a member of LinkedIn for since 2010, but not used it until 2022. And then did I use it properly in 2022? But as soon as the book had a publication date, I had to really learn how to use it. And I won't say that I'm perfect now, but my profile and that of Manual Magic has been elevated almost every day since, I would say, halfway through 2023 when I'd actually finished the manuscript.
Was that a learning for you, or do you have someone who helps you manage your social?
No, it's all me. As a journalist, you have this perhaps erroneous thought that you can do it all. Any writing, you can do it. So I tend to do all of that. Well, I do have a little help occasionally from AI. Again, we didn't have in going all back to the 70s, 80s, 90s. Now you get a little bit of help, and so long as you use it ethically, I really have no problem in anybody using it if it helps with productivity and that awful thing called the blank sheet. Where you think, oh my goodness, what am I going to create today?
So when you're having those blank sheet days, what does your process look like to get some ideas going?
Well, I think what I do is I tend to find a topic that I want to expand. So I want to get some bullet points. So I'll go to ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, and I say, right, I want to write about this topic. Give me some bullet points and give me something that is slightly left of center. And then I say, oh, that sounds interesting. I rather like that one. So I then expand that further and then start writing around it. So it works for me very well indeed. ChatGPT knows my writing style. I've trained it, and I can actually say to it, based on what you know about me, can you do X, Y, and Z? And it's pretty accurate.
It's amazing to speak to someone who's had their business running for so long and so much has happened in the world in that space of time. I think particularly in the last few years, probably. So I'm curious, what has been the most transformative development that's impacted your business?
Without a doubt, it's AI.
Hmm.
I suppose you could also say the word processor, the computer.
Mm,
You
for
know,
sure.
the PC. This American company, publishing company that I work for, had offices in London. They said, "You've got to come to the office. We've got something called a computer." Uh, I said, "Oh, that's exciting. Gosh." This was 1982, 81, 82. So I went over and I saw this thing and I thought, that looks interesting. And they got a scanner and a printer. And I thought, do you know, I've got that amount of money left from my move back to England. What if I could turn in error-free copy to all the publishers, all my editors? So I invested, and in those days, the memory of a computer was something like K. So it would remember anything. You couldn't. You couldn't keep anything. You had to. You had to process it and literally print it out and then send it by mail to the editor. I mean, it's silly.
Mm,
Looking back, I mean, I first learned to type on a manual typewriter.
mm.
So the word processor was a godsend to me, and I fully embraced it. And then I got bigger and better computers. You know, I was Windows based for most of the time, and then suddenly I thought, well, why not get a Mac? I looked at the Mac and I thought, this is absolutely wonderful, and everything is geared to being able to produce good sound copy for whoever needs it.
Sounds like you're
Amazing.
definitely an early adopter of all
Yeah.
these things. Just fantastic.
I was known as the go-to person in our little part of London for any problems that arose, because I could easily sort of get things back up and running again. I wasn't quite so good on hardware, but I did tend to take things apart and put them back together again, which goes
Oh,
back to my father, who was an engineer. He was a mechanical
Okay.
engineer, and I think he might
yeah.
have liked son. So he used to say to me, "Penny, this is what it does. This is how it does it. Now you do it."
The only way to learn is to do.
It actually it is, and this is a huge part of what I'm doing at the moment, because young people just do not like to read lots and lots of dull text, heavy stuff.
Mm,
They just won't do it, and you can understand why. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram era, you want bite-sized chunks of information. You don't want whole screeds of dull print. And
mm,
so I advocate using show, don't tell. That's
mm.
fundamentally what I'm about now.
So do you find that's changed in your business in the last few years since the advent of social media, instant gratification, that kind of thing? Did you ever feel like your business would become obsolete and that people aren't going to read manuals anymore?
They're not going to read manuals. We've got 5 generations under effectively under one workplace for the first time ever.
Mm,
And millennials and Generation Z, they will not read manuals. Their learning style is different. It's
mm,
peer-to-peer engagement. It's not top-down. And business has to understand that now.
Mhm.
Really, really important, because 30% of the workforce this year will be under 30. You know, that is a staggering proportion. Therefore, if you create an operations manual that is entirely text, 30% of your workforce, if they are young people, won't read it. And franchising, which I specialise in, depends on faithful replication of the business system, and the manual is a legal requirement between franchisor and franchisee.
So how do you overcome that?
I prefer to think about the manual as a knowledge-sharing environment where everybody can learn and grow and participate. So you have dynamic knowledge-sharing platforms, and one in particular, you can just use a smartphone to record a process, do it in little snippets, upload, caption, and the platform will be capable of translating it into any language that you choose. And you can use it visually, or you can use the audio.
Fantastic.
So and it gives you a single source of truth. Because that's the problem. When you've got a very large network, let's say you've got 4,000 franchisees in a network, you're not going to get training to the same high standard across the network. It's impossible. But if you've got a high standard of little video snippets, for example, if you're a barista, you've just been trained, but you don't know, you can't remember exactly how to strip down the coffee machine at the end of the day. You just capture the QR code. The QR code goes instantly to that process, and you can go and choose whatever language you prefer. You can do it at the pace you prefer, and you can have it visual or you can have it audio. And it will be the same standard whether you're in London or Timbuktu.
Weirdly, I'm going to switch direction a little bit, is you're obviously quite niche. Writing manuals, process manuals for franchises is very different from what you were initially doing, socioeconomic reporting from the Middle East. You said you had this business that you had a 2-year period of proof of concept. How did you kind of navigate that? Because if you're still in proof of concept phase, you don't know if something's going to work out. And it is a huge gamble. And I think a lot of people, especially in today's day and age, they're scared to take risks because what if I fail? Did you have like a backup plan? Was this like this has to be done? How did you start off this niche? I mean, it sounds like you've gone super niche. Did you start off with the ballpark, and then you kind of went further niche as you saw what the market needed? Maybe talk us through that.
Yeah, well, there was actually no plan. And the way that I did my proof of concept, I wasn't actually sure that I was going to have a proof of concept, but I wanted to know what my market value was, because there was nothing comparable. I'd done a marketing survey, so I knew that the market was there. I knew that there was a need to do quality operations manuals for management. So I kind of looked in, there's a newspaper called The Guardian in the UK, and on a Monday they had all the media opportunities. So I started looking through, and I found one that said City Corporation requires procedures manual writer. And I thought, oh, right, let's go and have a look at that and see what are they're going to pay. So I went along to the recruitment company, and I was super relaxed because I wasn't interested in taking the job. I was interested in knowing how much it was going to pay for what they were offering. They were asking somebody to do. And I got to the third stage and they said, well, actually, the internal procedures manual has been taken, but we'd like to offer you a new role for the external procedures. So those were the underwriting agents, procedures at Lloyd's of London, based on the Lloyd's Act and multiple bylaws. And it was so well paid on a contract basis, so I was still freelance, that I couldn't turn it down. I worked for them about 3 to 4 days a week, and the rest of the time I was doing my editorships. So I knew that if I failed and didn't go into the second year of the contract, I had something to fall back on. I was the editor of the Tourist Board publication and several other ones. So I actually virtually doubled my my wages, if you like, my turnover by doing them in parallel, which was amazing. And it did work out. It worked out very well because they offered me the second year. And then after I finished, they asked me to do some more documents on claims management and all this kind of thing. So it was certainly a baptism of fire with Media International, the European Journal for Planners of International Advertising. We were putting together huge supplements with all the publications. Let's say the theme was packaging. We'd have all the packaging publications throughout the world, and we'd have the subscription, the readership, all sorts of statistics. So I was used to putting a 48-page tabloid together. So I was really perfectly able and capable of putting a large document together. But there was a funny story, because it all went pretty smoothly, except for when I was liaising with the purchasing department on how much paper we would need for the first run of 2 volumes. And unfortunately, the decimal point got put in the wrong place. And all this paper arrived at the corporation, for which there was nowhere to put it. And as you know, paper is very, very sensitive to temperature, humidity, and I think they had the paper in 3 different sites. I mean, they used it all in the end. I suppose you could say that I forward bought by accident, but it was a real tricky moment.
Now, I follow a question regarding, you said it was like a baptism of fire, and I think that I also worked in travel for 20 years before I started my freelancing writing business, and I'm writing for the technology sector. So, a complete crossover. I'm not in any way related to what I was doing. And so imposter syndrome does come into it quite a lot because you've got this like, I wasn't doing this. I feel like I can because, as freelancers and as creatives, we can kind of pick up and run with something quite easily. But there's always that nagging at the back of your head, like, am I playing in a space where I shouldn't be playing, as well as when you are pitching for business, especially in, like you've come from travel going into manual writing. How did you kind of cope with that? Did you have that kind of imposter syndrome firstly? But how did you manage, temper your, I know I can do this with, holy crap, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes, I do know that feeling. I think it always happens when you start a new project that is unrelated to anything you've done before. So the Lloyd's of London project, I mean, it was huge. The corporation, continues to be one of the most revered organisations anywhere in the world. And here you are, giving the underwriters of huge projects like everything from oil refineries through down to dancers' legs and pianists' fingers to be insured. The responsibility is huge, and I did work. I was lucky because I worked with experts there. But what I was trying to do was to delegalize everything because we had the Lloyd's Act and we had the multiple bylaws, without it losing its correct resonance. And we were in danger that the top legal advisor at Lloyd's wanted to turn it all back into legalese. And so you thought, oh my goodness, have I done it correctly? But we got over that. I think the time that I really worried about feeling an imposter was when I was writing the book, because I was doing something disruptive. How would everybody take that? Would they embrace it? or would they think that I was mad? Luckily, mostly it's been embraced. So with that comes confidence that you've managed to get over what would have been a major hurdle. Because if it had been, if, for example, my first review on Amazon had been, what on earth does she think she's talking about? You know, we actually can't see this. We can't see it'll ever happen. Then I think I would have been crushed, and that imposter syndrome would have been realised. But luckily, it was the reverse, and now
Awesome.
I tend to go everywhere and say, right, you know, please don't produce a text-heavy operations manual. This is how you.
It's amazing. So I want to try and round off. Have you got any questions for Penny before I do the closing? I'm going to blindside Penny with a question.
Penny, having been in the industry for so long and having seen so many changes, I mean, what's next? What are we? I mean, I'm not asking you to look into a crystal ball or anything, but I mean, how do you see things changing even further in the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years?
I think anybody who doesn't use AI at the moment is going to be left behind. I think AI is going to be more and more part of our day-to-day job. We're going to have agents who are going to automate a lot of it for us. I think as far as my job is concerned, augmented reality is going to be very much to the fore. It's been prohibitively expensive, but I think very soon we'll be able to train, and the trainee will be able to see themselves in a situation where they can learn how things are done. It'll be all visual. There will be very, very little text-based stuff. And really looking further, I think our lives will be made simple. They will be simplified in many ways. I think that some of the tasks that we really, really don't like doing are going to be taken over by AI and simplified. I think there are so many things that demand our attention at the moment. You know, how many ways of communication? I had to stop somebody and say, look, there are too many ways that I can communicate. I want to cut them down. I just want to have email and maybe WhatsApp. I don't want Messenger as well as everything else, and LinkedIn, because
Slack
yeah,
is the devil.
you get to the stage where you don't know where that bit of information is. And I was just looking at an app this morning that said the review, the write-up, it described a situation where it can pull everything together. Well, I'd love to see that because I will pay the earth for it. I just, you know, there is just so much duplication. Everybody's demanding your instant attention, and you can't always give it.
Yeah. My blindside question, Penny, is we picking up on some of the themes that you have mentioned during this conversation. So, keeping up with technology is one, leveraging your networks is another one, developing transferable skills, working with experts. All of these were kind of themes that bubbled out. And I think they're important themes, not just for freelancers, but for anyone as we go kind of more increasingly towards an AI driven world. What are the things that freelancers today should be doing to ensure longevity for their careers?
I think that they should look towards formalizing their businesses. They don't have to be limited companies, but formalize it insofar as they protect it. Protect and leverage your IP, your intellectual property, because when you think about it, all the articles, everything that you write, everything that you design, and everything that you structure needs to go towards something. And I would say that by formalizing my freelance career as a business was the difference that made the difference. So you come to a tipping point where your brand, your profile, people know you for what you do, protect it. Make sure that, I mean, there's, I think, Prince. I think I'm right in saying that the artist, who was formerly known as Prince, didn't protect his name, and therefore he had to come up with something different where he could get his copyright back. And I think, writers who write so much, since the beginning of 2023, I've written 70 million words, which is a staggering amount. But all those words need to be formalized into something. Write a book, write an ebook, protect it, make sure that you can leverage the IP that you have. And if you get to that stage where you think you want to build your business, not just as a freelance, but as something more formal, then make sure that the foundations are sound and you structure the business in a way that if something happened and you couldn't work for some time, you can hand the reins over to somebody, which is why people write operations manuals. They capture the processes. So capture the processes so that if, should, God forbid, something happen and you can't work, so protect yourself right from the start.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Penny. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. Your experience and acumen and everything, it's been very valuable, and I know that it's going to resonate a lot with our audience as well. We're going to obviously publish Penny's details in the there'll be a link to her manual magic book that she published in 2023. Thanks again, Penny. It's been super interesting and really, really valuable.
Thank you both very, very much. It's been a delight to meet you both.